Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon. This is Jaap with Talon. Thanks for joining our webinar today on centralizing and consolidating your data using the FAST Fabric and modernizing your distributed storage environment. We will start momentarily. There's a couple of more attendees joining, so we'll give it a couple of more minutes. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining our webinar today on how to modernize your distributed storage environment using the FAST Fabric. I do see a couple of more attendees joining, so we'll give it one more minute and then we'll get started. Thanks. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our webinar today on how to modernize your distributed storage environment using the FAST Fabric. This is the second in our fall webinar series in which we would like to share on how you can drastically reduce cost and complexity associated with a distributed storage environment by leveraging the FAST Fabric. Our intelligent file caching technology will touch upon how it integrates within customers' environments and dig a little bit deeper from a technical point of view. In our last session, we discussed how we help organizations to make their investments in storage and applications work better, a little bit more focused on high-level data center storage and cloud strategy. This session will be a little bit deeper from a technical perspective in terms of how to deal with distributed branch office environments. We will keep you informed. There's more to come. There's another webinar session which includes a technical demo in the first week of December. Again, we are recording the sessions. If you have any questions, please post them in the questions section. We'll pick them up at the tail end of the session and share the recording with you. I hope you can all see my desktop. My name is Jaap van Duijvenbode. I'm product director with Talon, primarily responsible for product strategy and working with a team of global partners to help organizations solve the challenges around distributed storage. With me is Andrew Mullen. He's our Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing, and he will talk you through who we are and through the agenda of today and elaborate a little bit more on the drivers at the end of this session. So Andy, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Jaap, and thanks for joining today. As Jaap had mentioned, first webinar about making investments in storage and applications work better. And then today's webinar is really going to be discussing how to modernize distributed storage environments using the Talon FAST Fabric. So I'll just reiterate in terms of who Talon is. It's an organization that was founded in 2010. We're headquartered in the United States in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, just about 20 minutes outside of Philadelphia. We have sales offices, engineering, as well as support throughout the globe: India, Netherlands, United Kingdom, multiple offices through the US as well. The real focus of our organization has been around delivering software-defined storage solutions for distributed enterprises. And that's a pretty broad term, but what that means is that we're really looking at customers that have anywhere from 5 locations to 100 locations that we can address the inherent challenge around distributed file storage, unstructured data, as well as storage and server proliferation. Our organization, as we said, was founded in 2010. Started actually shipping product in 2012. 350 customers worldwide, probably growing at around 25 to 30% quarter over quarter. We're deployed at over 10,000 plus branch offices globally. That's pretty significant when you look at the size of our customers in terms of the scope of what we're doing. Just a snapshot of some of our customers. They range from the healthcare industry to medical research to marketing research to toy manufacturing to large-scale construction to retail and sourcing, manufacturing, and obviously digital print, as well as large engineering and construction. The verticals that we focus in on is AEC, design, manufacturing research, energy and offshore, financial services, and healthcare. What you'll find through today's session is why we've been so agnostic when it comes to specific customers and verticals, and how the Talon FAST Fabric fits into those environments seamlessly and transparently. So for the agenda today, we're going to talk about branch office storage considerations, workarounds, and solutions. We're going to reiterate some of the usual suspects around local storage infrastructure, data replication, and cloud storage controllers. We're not really going to talk about why something is better or worse for a customer, but we're going to talk about some of the inherent challenges of these particular solutions. Some of them may have worked for you in the past, some may not work for you today or in the future. We're then going to talk around perfect world scenarios and what that means using a software-defined approach. Obviously, we'd all like to be in a perfect world scenario, so this should be an interesting component of the webinar. We're going to get into a little more detail around the FAST Fabric and the underlying technology and what makes the fabric so unique, how to deploy it, in terms of design approach, how we work with our partners as well as customers to deploy these solutions successfully, then come to our conclusions and open it up for Q&A. In addition, I just wanted to reiterate that there will be a third session coming up, and that's on December 6th, which is really talking about intelligent file caching and how you streamline IT resources and eliminate branch office backups. This will focus more on the ability to cache data intelligently and how you manage that data.
Great.
Thank you, Jaap.
Thanks, Andy, for that introduction, and thanks everyone for joining. And I just wanted to recap briefly on some of the branch office storage considerations that we talked about in our previous session. It was very obvious that, from the attendees that joined that session, up to 40% actually had the challenge of managing local file storage in their distributed enterprises. So what we're seeing in general when we're having conversations with our customers, we talk about these challenges in 2 ways. We talk about the impact from a business perspective and from an IT perspective. And let me start with the IT challenges that we're seeing. If we're having a discussion about managing islands of data and managing distributed storage, we find that a lot of customers, they have challenges managing those local storage assets. Every office has its own file server, has its own backup, has its own data management. So very quickly you'll run into issues when it comes to the management of that infrastructure, securing that environment, and unifying the way that you're actually dealing with your branch office infrastructure. A lot of customers have tried things like local file storage, data replication. We've also seen customers from an IT perspective embracing EFSS tools to kind of overcome the challenges that they're having of the islands of data that they are actually working on. If you are considering the business impact, we often see that there's a productivity challenge. There's a challenge from the fact that you're having to work on multiple islands of data that present duplicate and conflicting file versions. Customers often suffer from data loss as well as file integrity issues. Like I said, EFSS sometimes introduces complex business workflow because users, they can't really work on multiple sources of the truth. And as we all know, users will find a way to solve a specific problem. So they go around what you provide as an IT infrastructure play, and they basically start to deploy their own solutions, consumer-grade tools, Dropbox, Box, you name it, to overcome the challenges that they're having. Also, what we're finding in large-scale enterprises that deal with a lot of distance and global offices, that's where, for example, an approach such as VDI presents a significant challenge because the latency associated with the endpoints and the actual VDI farms. So there's actually those two issues. And when you look closely at things like data replication, for example, you find that it's really hard to manage that infrastructure. And as you go and grow as an organization, it becomes tougher as you're acquiring companies, as you're merging with other entities, etc. So basically, there are actually three options that we've discussed in last session. We talked about what does it mean to manage your local file server. It's difficult to manage. You can't really plan for capacity. You can't really plan for growth and provisioning the right type of storage and infrastructure in those locations. Managing backups is really painful because often people still work with USB drives, tape drives, or even backup to the cloud types of solution that doesn't provide a full secure strategy with regards to backup. Duplicate data, isolated data sets. It's a real problem that organizations deal with. And as a result, it becomes really costly to manage that infrastructure, and you don't really have the flexibility that you want to provide from a data center storage and from a branch office storage perspective. Subsequently, we've been working with a lot of customers that have tried DFS replication or data replication in general. And in essence, you're looking at kind of moving data pretty much in a superficial way where you're just moving large file shares from one place to the other. You don't really know where those file shares are required, who is working on them. And subsequently, you're managing all these replication tasks that can be really challenging and difficult to manage. What we're also finding is because typically last replicator wins in these types of models, the data sets themselves become inconsistent. So if I'm working from Amsterdam and Andy is working from the US, we both see a different version of the truth. And that's really challenging. Subsequently, it also increases the storage footprint and management costs associated with that. Think about multiple terabytes or even petabytes worth of storage being replicated throughout the distributed enterprise. It adds cost complexity, it lacks scalability, and you can't really collaborate because there's no single version of the truth. Now, over time, over the last, let's say, 5 years, there's been some solutions have been introduced to kind of lift and shift all of your file storage or unstructured data into the cloud and actually provide a hardware-based or controller-based type of solution to give your end users in your branch offices access to that data. There's a couple of there's a couple of benefits in this model, but the challenge at the enterprise level is that you're talking about petabytes worth of storage or maybe even hundreds of terabytes, and it's really hard to move that data over the weekend, for example, into the cloud to provide for that, that functionality and to provide for a proper consolidation strategy. So on one end, it's the question on how do you move that data to a single location. And on the other end, it's about how do I get the performance now that I have a single controller using my internet breakout to go into a cloud, whether that's in my local region or in an extended region. How do you ensure performance? How do you ensure scalability? What are the cloud charges? What if I basically bring up a new office and I have to hydrate a local storage endpoint? What are the costs associated with that model? And last but not least, how do I deal with my centralized storage? Is that storage that resides in the cloud, is that actually mine? Or is there a specific vendor lock-in, i.e. a wrapper around it kind of creates a proprietary file system that is not accessible if you want to take the solution out of the picture? So these are all considerations from a branch office storage perspective. And when we're talking to our clients, and we touched on this last time, the perfect world scenario that they're trying to accomplish is that scenario of providing a single set of data. A data set that is centralized in nature, that is secured and fits into any type of authentication and authorization frameworks. A solution that's easy to scale out, whether that's horizontally, as you're adding offices, as you're merging with companies, or vertically in terms of the amount of capacity of storage that you're dealing with. You also want to provide a solution that provides data consistency, which means that where you're always seeing the latest and greatest documents and unstructured data throughout the environment. Subsequently, what we're seeing not only at the data center but also at the branch offices, to have the benefit of software-defined flexibility, leveraging commodity hardware, leveraging your existing virtualization strategy to create a more intelligent approach to presenting storage to your end users in those distributed locations. And last but not least, as we're talking about unstructured file data, a lot of the applications that deal with that data, they require distributed file locking, whether that's on a file basis or on an element basis. You need to be able to adhere to all of those principles so that some user in one location is not overwriting someone else's changes and have that secure benefit in real time. So with that thought process, in 2012, we shipped our first product, Talon FAST, which stands for File Acceleration and Sharing Technology. And our approach has always been to deliver a software-based solutions that helps enterprises to centralize and consolidate all of their unstructured data from their distributed offices into a single set of data. Whether the customer has a traditional on-premise data center infrastructure or wants to go into the cloud, public cloud, private cloud, or a combination of both in terms of hybrid. As a result, customers want to eliminate complexity around storage and infrastructure and backups at the branch. And the way that we've accomplished that is by creating an intelligent file caching software-based solution that runs on Windows Server. As a result, we've been able to deliver instant enterprise global file sharing with distributed file locking for these end users, because now everyone works on a single centralized authoritative data set and can experience a high performance experience at every location, because you're overcoming some of the challenges around and the constraints around latency and bandwidth provided by the Windows file sharing protocol. Not only is this beneficial from an IT perspective and a business perspective, but it also helps you to drastically cut the cost of managing storage throughout your distributed environment. Some of our clients have been able to cut storage costs over 70% by reducing the footprint of data at these offices and consolidating unstructured data at the data center, subsequently applying a modernization strategy to move their data to cheaper storage at the back end. Now we're going to talk a little bit about Talon FAST, the software itself, and how it fits into customers' enterprises. Talon FAST Enterprise Edition is a software-based solution that runs on Windows Server 2012 R2 onwards. Our software integrates within your Microsoft ecosystem, which means that you can leverage our technology in conjunction with your existing Windows Server templates, with your existing services like AD, DNS, DHCP, print services, SCCM, software distribution, and even with Microsoft Azure to create a fully consolidated and streamlined branch office footprint. The software is available as a software installation package that you layer on top of your Windows server, or as a virtual appliance template that includes the operating system as well as the software. Our focus has always been that we're storage agnostic. So when you're deploying our software in your environment, we can work with any type of backend infrastructure. Like I said, whether that's traditional on-premise or whether that's hyper-converged, software-defined, hybrid cloud or public cloud. The software is intelligent. It only caches what's needed at the branch and thereby drastically reducing cost and complexity associated with managing that storage. Now you can have access to hundreds of terabytes of data in a branch office by leveraging a microserver with our software on top of it. You may only need a couple of hundred gigabytes of storage to facilitate for the active data set. Subsequently, the cache itself is zero touch. We'll talk about that a little bit later. As the cache automatically purges stale cached files over time, the files that are kind of not used anymore by the users, and allows for new, freshly cached files to be hydrated into the file system cache. Subsequently, because we're eliminating the challenges of the SMB/CIFS protocol over the wide area network, we are ensuring a high-performant environment. We are compressing the data between what we call the edge at the branch office and the core at the data center, and we're streaming and drastically reducing the amount of data that crosses the wide area network. I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. Subsequently, we are here to provide a consistent experience for all users throughout the distributed enterprise, which means that everyone throughout the enterprise will see the same types of folder structures, file shares, file names, and everything, and supplies for distributed file locking. Like said, which means that if I'm opening a file from Amsterdam and someone else opens a file at the other end of the world, in real time, I will obtain that file lock. The other user will get a message that this file is in use by Jaap in Amsterdam. Now, a little bit more about the fabric. What does the fabric really mean? What does it create? What is it made out of? And what do I need to implement this solution? If you look at the idea on a high-level basis of centralization of data and really accomplishing this idea of a single data set, there's multiple ways to approach this. Whether you have one data center, 20 data centers, BCDR strategy with cloud, all kinds of different options are available. But in essence, what you're trying to do is you're trying to create this idea of a hub and spoke model that allows your branch offices to connect into your single set of data. As a result, your distributed locations will actually connect into the fabric using an instance of our software. So what does it mean? You'll install an instance of our software at the data center, which is the core, and you will install an instance of the software at the branch office, which is what we call the edge. The software provides a virtual file share and intelligent file cache at each location. Every branch office has its own unique active data set, its own unique cache, and supplies the data that is relevant to the users in that specific office. As a result, it enables high-performance global file sharing with real-time distributed file locking. If we look a little bit closer and think about some of the considerations of our customers that are working with some of our partners around managing their data, and in our previous session we talked about the considerations when you're streamlining the way that you're dealing with data at your data center. Typically, we would say the FAST Fabric is storage agnostic. We can mount to any type of storage infrastructure at your data center, whether that's your traditional storage, whether that's hybrid cloud storage, or whether that's public cloud storage with, for example, Microsoft Azure, Amazon, or SoftNAS in this case. Subsequently, by actually moving towards this centralized and consolidated model, all of your data management is done centrally. That means the management of your volumes. That means the management of your authentication and authorization, ACLs, NTFS permissions, security in general. It integrates with your enterprise backup solution. So this is where you define your recovery time objectives and your recovery point objectives. So now that you're able to create this idea of a centralized approach, how are you going to get that data back to those end users in those distributed locations? And that's where we come in. The FAST Fabric is actually enabled by deploying what we call the core instance sitting next to your data center storage. And the core instance transparently mounts to your corporate file shares, direct attached storage, or cloud storage. The core also provides for streaming and compression between the data center and the edge locations, in this case the distributed locations on the left-hand side, which ensures an optimal performance, high performance, and eliminates some of the constraints around latency, high latency, and low bandwidth in that sense. Additionally, the core is also responsible as a manager for the distributed file locks and leases that are in place. So if I open up a file from a branch office, the branch office looks and feels as a traditional file server. I'm opening the file, a lock is centrally obtained, I'm getting the lock, and if someone else tries to open that same file at the same time, he will get a message that this file is in use by Jaap in Amsterdam. It works exactly the same way as a Microsoft Windows server would operate and work, but then on a global scale. And the nice thing about this model is it's actually providing the option to scale out your storage platforms. So you could have a combination of on-premise and hybrid cloud storage. You can aggregate those storage footprints throughout the FAST Fabric and present all of these distributed storage assets and the central storage assets to your branch offices. Think about presenting multiple petabytes of centralized storage to your branch offices and only caching the active data set. Typically, we find that less than 10% of your total data sets are actively used in the environment, and as a result, you'll be able to drastically cut the cost and complexity associated with the storage needed in your branch offices. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the technology associated with the fabric. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on the distributed locations that connect to one or multiple fabrics, what their role is, how it deploys, and actually how it behaves in an environment. Now in this example, I got two branch offices connected into a single storage fabric. The FAST Fabric enables and listens for connections coming in from edges all over the world to access that centralized data. At all times, all of the semantics around permissions, ACLs will be honored from all the way from the data center to the branch offices. This means that if I can open a file or a file share or a folder at the data center because I have the right permissions, you could do the same thing at the branch office as well, and vice versa. So it's really important to understand that this edge connects to the fabric in the data center or in the cloud. It transparently extends to central file shares that contains unstructured data to the distributed locations and users. And because we're talking our own streaming protocol between the edge and the core, we're eliminating the latency and bandwidth constraints that typically go with file sharing over the wide area network. In addition to this, we're leveraging some technology benefits that allows us to leverage write-back caching and read-ahead, which means that if I have a large, let's say 3D model or a large file set that I need to save to my central data set, I can save it as if it's local. I can save it quickly to the local file cache, and subsequently, when that job's completed, the actual edge will communicate with the core and stream the data across the wide area network in a controlled fashion. So that model really allows and absorbs all of the bottlenecks from working in a distributed environment from the users and basically absorbs it within the fabric and extend that into the data center storage infrastructure. There's two things that are sitting on top of a Talon instance at the branch. It's a virtual file share and it's the intelligent file cache. So what do I need to deploy this software? Obviously, I need a piece of hardware. That's one thing. Whether that's a traditional server, whether that's a rack-based server, whether that's a desktop type of server, we need 8 gigabytes of RAM, 2 CPUs, basic requirements to run a Windows Server instance. On top of that, we will need a partition that basically defines the intelligent file cache. And the file cache itself can be a couple of hundred gigabytes, can be terabytes, depending on what the active data set looks like at the branch office. So by installing our software on top of Windows Server at the branch office, or virtualizing it on Hyper-V or VMware, we create the intelligent file cache, and we'll create a virtual file share. The virtual file share is presented as a traditional UNC path, which means that you can browse to whack edge, whack fast data, and then basically access your centralized data. You can map to this directly through DFS or through a namespace or a map drive in this sense. We'll talk a little bit about that further. Additionally, it contains the intelligent file cache, which obviously is provisioned as what we call the D drive, that consists of the raw data associated with the active data set for the cache in that specific location. So in this model, New York could have a completely different cache than Sydney. However, there's ways to pre-populate specific file shares, folders, or subfolder structures with different type of parameters to seed the cache with the active data set, which is really exciting. So a lot of customers ask me, like, how does this file cache work? How does it zero touch? Why is the Edge Intelligent File Cache managing itself, and how is it doing that? So as I said before, the cache itself is unique for every branch office. It allows you to present petabytes of storage to even your smallest offices. The cache actually grows organically over time and keeps the active data set close to the users. So let's say you provision a terabyte of storage in a specific branch office. Over time, that capacity or the utilization of that volume will grow. And as soon as it hits the 80% mark, what we'll do, we'll schedule what we call the purging process. And we schedule it for execution at night at 9 p.m. by default. What it actually does, it actually schedules a cleanup of the cache based on a least recently used mechanism. So it will basically clean up the stale cache data that sits on that NTFS volume that presents the cache. And as it cleans out that stale data, it actually frees up the space for newly cached data or newly hydrated data to come into. This is really, really effective. You don't really have to worry about continuously adding storage or adding capacity to your distributed branch offices. Now, the nice thing about this model is, if for whatever reason the cache grows exponentially during the course of a single day, i.e. a rogue user copying a lot of data to the file share, we will schedule an immediate purge as soon as we hit 95% of the disk being utilized. That allows us to protect and secure the data that is being seeded into the cache, and it allows us to quickly clean up the least recently used in real time. So if you look at some of our software features and think about, what does the core do? The core creates the fabric, and the edge basically presents the intelligent file cache and the virtual file share at the branch office. So the core is deployed on a Windows server. It mounts to your file shares, and it can mount to any type of SMB or CIFS file shares, iSCSI targets, or even Azure files, or when you integrate with, for example, softnets, we can directly mount to that as well. The core actually acts as a traffic cop between the users and the central data set, and it's fully transparent. Your users will not notice that there's different elements in between their workstations and the destination file server. The core also mounts to multiple authoritative data sources. So if you have an abundance of file servers at your data center, different types of models, different types of shapes, different types of methodologies, we can aggregate all these file sets in a single namespace and present them out at the branch office in real time. Subsequently, we can leverage some intelligence around inclusion-exclusion lists that allows you to control the ability to cache or share files at from a specific data center source to a specific location. Also, the core is responsible for facilitating global file locking and ensuring data integrity. The edge, in that other sense, is also deployed on a Windows server, but it's deployed in your distributed locations. When you deploy it, you configure it, you associate it with the fabric, it actually looks and feels as a traditional server, but it only caches what's actively being used. We present the offline attribute to files that are not being cached, so the users can actually clearly see which files are cached and which files are not, which is a real benefit. The virtual file share, like I said, can be mapped to directly through a UNC path, or can be embedded within a DFS namespace, which is really important when you want to provide a unified namespace to your users on a global scale and actually want to create like a single instance that is consistent and coherent throughout the enterprise. The file cache itself is also deployed on the edge instance. It's an NTFS file system. It's a standard Windows volume that you can leverage. The benefit of caching active data sets on an NTFS volume is that you can not only cache the actual data itself, but also the metadata, the ACLs, the attributes, and everything associated with those files. And that's how we're able to serve 99% of the cache, or 99% of the data out of the cache to the end users and providing that experience and that performance. The edge communicates with the core. You can have multiple edges connecting to a single core instance and multiple file servers being associated with a single core. So that is how the software lays out and how the core creates the fabric and the edge creates the file cache at the branch office. Now this all sounds very easy. This all sounds very straightforward, but when we're having our conversations with customers, it's not just about the technology. It's not just about, hey, I'm going to implement this piece of software and it's going to do this for me. It's typically about helping customers to modernize the way that they're dealing with their storage, their centralization of data, the consolidation of storage aspects from a branch office, and actually hand-holding them through the whole process of saying, like, I got 50 offices today, all have local storage, local backup. I want to move to a centralized model, and we're gradually going to guide you in that process on that journey towards that type of model. Now, like I said in the beginning, this is not a lift and shift approach. This allows you to transparently integrate a solution within your environment that delivers a lot of benefits in terms of how you manage storage. So for that, we've built a very eloquent solution design approach and deployment framework. It touches upon the different aspects of deploying not only the FAST solution, but also help you to plan, design, create a proper deployment strategy, advise on hybrid cloud or public cloud strategies as well, and help you with the provisioning process. Things like data management. How do I pick up my server at the branch office, move that data centrally, and stage out the active data set in my cache? How do my users get the most benefit out of the solution now that they can work on a single set of data and on a single source of truth? And how do I get to some sort of deployment completion so that I can close out my project, move on to the next one, and if I have to circle back and expand my environment with a couple of more offices, I have a very detailed framework to do so. So a couple of considerations here. During the course of planning and design, we typically talk about your data center and your branch office infrastructure. What does it look like today? How much storage are you dealing with? What are your backup requirements? What hardware do you have available to facilitate the solution? And how does it fit in terms of the amount of users, the amount of sites, and the amount of data centers that you want to deal with? Subsequently, we're talking about a deployment strategy. We say, hey, what if we could actually help you centralize the data, create a business continuity and disaster recovery scenario, for example, with hybrid cloud storage solutions, or leveraging a public cloud storage environment with the benefits of LRS and GRS, and overlay that with backup. What are your considerations there? Again, we don't own that process, but we'll help you on your journey in moving towards that strategy. Subsequently, we come up with a detailed solution design approach, which encapsulates everything from an end user all the way to the way that you're managing your data. The provisioning process, that is where we're talking about the FAST Fabric, the core and the edge, the software, and the way that you're going to deploy this. The nice thing about that our software sits on Windows Server, it allows us to benefit from all the components that Microsoft gives us in terms of software distribution, in terms of configuration, in terms of provisioning of those servers. So some of our clients, they've been very intelligent about the way that they're doing this, and they say, hey, Jaap, I want to actually script my whole environment. I want to push out 50 sites on Windows Server Core. I want to use PowerShell desired state configuration to manage and maintain my environment. and ensure that all the configuration aspects are in compliance with what I define as part of managing my infrastructure. We work transparently in those types of environment. Subsequently, we also work with customers to create kind of logically organize their data sets. It's one thing to move all your data from a branch office into a single data set, picking up the storage and moving it individually in pretty much centralized islands of data. But it's more beneficial if you think about how do you logically present your storage and your data to your end users. It gives them the ability to collaborate. And for that, we transparently integrate with things like DFS namespaces, and we'll help you with a DFS namespace design to build a fully redundant infrastructure. Subsequently, it's about understanding of active data sets. Now, if I'm moving my file server from an office, a couple of terabytes worth of storage, to a data center, what's the best way of accomplishing that? What does my active data present for that specific location? Can I use that data to partially provision my edge instance with a cached copy of the data so that the users have the benefit of accessing the cache immediately once I move the data from the central location to the central data center infrastructure? We help customers with defining a data migration and pre-population strategy as well. Last but not least, some of the most important things is end user onboarding. It's all about adoption in environments where you're going to make a change towards centralization of data, reorganizing of your folder structures, your file shares, the way that users are consuming and collaborating the data. It's really important to understand, are there specific applications that require specific best practices? Think about, external references in, for example, AutoCAD. If you have relative or if you have absolute references, a CAD project pointing to file server 1 at a branch office, well, guess what? That file server 1 doesn't exist anymore. You need to make sure that your projects contain relative references. So if you move them around from branch office to data center, they're still consistent and still in compliance with what you require from a user workflow perspective. And subsequently, when you can you educate your users in terms of using the new central working environment or collaborative working environment, whatever terminology you come up with, we help customers define that communication strategy as well. So whether that's an internet page, whether that's an email, whether that's a video, we'll help with the education aspect. So all in all, you can see this is not just the software itself that defines the success of a centralization initiative. It's really the integration with the different components of your data center storage assets, the fabric that you create, whether that's using the cloud or a combination of your data center and cloud infrastructure. It really benefits from a software-defined approach and this trend in the industry that we're seeing around leveraging more intelligent ways and more cost-effective ways to manage your storage and present your storage throughout the environment. So we come down to the conclusions of what the Fabric delivers as part of a software-defined approach. You can leverage your commodity hardware and virtualization strategy, so therefore drastically reduce the cost and complexity associated with your branch office infrastructure. The Fabric enables you to transparently fit into any type of data center storage strategy, whether you're ready for the cloud or whether you basically are planning towards moving to the cloud. We can be there for you today. We can fit into any type of BCDR requirements that you have, whether you have a separate data center for disaster purposes, whether you want to leverage the cloud as a DR strategy. By caching only the active data sets, you're drastically reducing the branch office storage, which means that you don't have to manage that storage. You don't have to worry about securing that data. You don't have to worry about permissions, data management, all kinds of issues that you have with local storage. If you will lose a branch office, it's a matter of spinning up another VM and basically presenting the centralized data set. Your cache will hydrate automatically as your users are accessing the data. You got immediate on-demand capacity through the software, and it allows for rapid expansion. So the software package, and you'll see in the next webinar where one of our solutions engineers is going to demo how to deploy the software, that in 15 minutes you can have access to centralized data sets. you can have hundreds of terabytes or multiple petabytes worth of centralized storage and present all that storage even to the smallest offices with the smallest storage and infrastructure footprint out there. Subsequently, the solution as a whole can be automatically provisioned as needed. It's transparent to environments that you currently have today, that you're looking at for the future, and it's non-disruptively integrating within industry standard platforms and protocols. So there's nothing proprietary into what we do. A lot of customers, they like us because they can say, well, I still manage my data center assets separately from the fabric. I'm not locked into a specific vendor. If I want to move out, if I want to change my strategy, I can do that today without impacting my end user productivity. Last but not least, obviously financial benefits are a huge decision maker when it comes to enabling solutions as such. And I mentioned at the front end of the conversation that some of our customers have been able to achieve over 70% of cost reduction on storage infrastructure by leveraging this software-defined strategy, combination of commodity hardware, virtualization, and drastically reduce the cost of ownership associated with that infrastructure as well. We're allowing to integrate in any environment of choice, and like I said, I think I can't, I sound like a broken record maybe, but the real journey towards moving towards a centralized data set is to leverage what you have today and gradually move with the trends into, for example, Amazon, Azure, any type of cloud type of strategy. By being able to finally to centralize and consolidate the storage and deliver collaboration to your users on a global scale on all of the unstructured data, you drastically enhance productivity for users wherever they are, whether they're in Australia, whether they're in the UK, whether they're in America. You ensure data consistency in real time and introduce the ease of collaboration for all of the enterprise applications they work with. So basically that wraps up our session for today. There's a couple of key elements on why Talon, and these are just snapshots on why customers choose to partner with us or one of our partners, whether that's our resellers or technology partners, to kind of pick up this initiative and say, hey, I want to go through this journey with you. I want to make sure that we can actually pick up this largest workload in the environment, which is storage, and basically move through that to a centrally managed and centrally maintained infrastructure. So that kind of wraps up today's session. I would like to open it up for questions and subsequently direct you to either the handout section, which contains our solution overview, which gives you a little bit more info, or to our website at www.talonstorage.com/getting started. Let me see, a couple of questions here, guys. Let's see. I get the file share solution, but could customers do this with a VMware data store or a Hyper-V volume? I'm not 100% sure if I understand your question, but if you're trying to kind of redistribute your VMware data stores or your Hyper-V VHDXs or VHDs, there may be ways to accomplish that. We typically focus on unstructured application data. Think about your Microsoft Office files, your Adobe Creative Suite files, Autodesk, Bentley MicroStation, you name it. But there's definitely ways to kind of, I see a potential for leveraging, for example, the repurposing of our caching technology to distribute your VHDX images. Will a recording of this session will be available? Yes, this session is recorded. We will share this within the next 24 hours. And we will post this on our website as well in the next couple of weeks. Is there any encryption of the file cache on the edge instances? That's a great question. Some of our customers, one of them being the largest toy company in the world, no names mentioned, have leveraged our technology to secure the data in their branch offices as well. So even though you have a cache that presents the active data sets and presents a ghost copy of what the authoritative data set at the data center presents, the actual cache volume can be encrypted, for example, with BitLocker drive encryption in conjunction with trusted platform module support. So if you want to ensure that when someone walks away with your branch office server, that data is useless, you can integrate with, for example, BitLocker. How does this compare to Azure File Sync recently in beta? That's a great question. Obviously, we've been around for the last 7 years, so that's we're light years ahead in terms of technology and compatibility. But the main differentiator with regards to Azure Talon versus Azure File Sync is that we can work in any type of enterprise environment. There is no limitations in terms of the amount of data that you're presenting, the size of the file shares. In Azure Files, it is 5 terabytes, and the maximum file size is 1 terabyte. And the amount of edges and branch offices that you integrate within your environment. Azure File Sync provides a server group configuration which only allows you to integrate 5 servers in that server group. And it leverages the same type of principles of replication of data through the Azure Storage Fabric. Subsequently, and this is the main differentiator, there's no support for global file locking in an Azure Files world. So you still have the challenges that you're having maybe today with your DFSR infrastructure. That last replicator or last writer would win in that scenario. And there's another question: would we be sending a recording of this session? Yes, again, I will. We'll put this together and share this with you in the next 24 hours. I would like to stress that on December 6th, we're going to do a follow-up webinar. It's going to be a little bit more interactive. I want to have like an open forum where we're going to demonstrate how our intelligent file caching technology not only integrates and installs and how it deploys and how it's set up, but also how it actually works to streamline your IT resources and how it helps to eliminate branch office backups by consolidating data into a centralized storage footprint. So with that, I will be stopping the recording now and looking forward to our next webinar, December 6th. Thank you so much for joining today. And if there's any additional questions, feel free to reach out to us at info@talonstorage.com. And we may speak soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.